everyone, and welcome to the Shakespearean Shrew. I am your Shakespearean Shrew, Karen Feiner, professor from the University of Oklahoma and lover of all things bard. This podcast is a decorum-be-damned entrance into understanding Shakespeare's stages, for there are many, and all the players on it. I am back at the Mermaid Tavern in the Paseo District with Erin Woods, who plays all the roles, so she can tell us about all the stages. So she is playwright, director, actor, producer, graphic designer.
What if that was all for the same show? No, that's for all different shows.
But that would be amazing.
That would be
it's
great.
the one-woman show.
It's one woman, and I just do everything. So, now.
So we're talking because 'tis the season.
It's Christmas time almost. Almost.
We're just looking for it because we need all the joy and happiness.
We need a little Christmas
right now. We need a little Christmas in our
lives.
And so we've got the Christmas Cracker coming up.
That's right.
And we're very excited because this is always one of my favorite events. And you wrote it.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about how it came about, when it emerged.
Okay, so back in this is the 10-year anniversary of it. It's not been done solidly for 10 years, but it has been done actually every year. So I think this is the 8th performance of it 10 years ago. I wrote it in 2014 for another theater company. I was working with a director. There are some Jane Austen Christmas shows out there. He wasn't really reading any scripts that he loved that were in existence. So we kind of talked about developing a show, and then I went back into my hole, which is my office, and I just wrote out a bunch of scenes and Oklahoma chapter that year. And I was a part of that inaugural group. And they were talking about going all over the country and to parts of Canada to go to these events that were Jane Austen themed. And one of the things that they did was that they wore Regency costume. They not only discussed the books, but they had these events where it was very cosplay heavy. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could go to an event that was a Christmas play, but then you could also dance with the characters, because they were all dancing at these events as well, learning the country dances that would have been part of Jane Austen's world, that are very much part of any film version you've ever seen of a Jane Austen story. But they weren't dancing with Mr. Darcy. They weren't dancing with Captain Wentworth or Elizabeth Bennet. And I thought, we all know and love these characters. Why don't we also incorporate a part of the play where they get to interact? So that was the exciting part. And from that, it was born. And actually, he cast it before it was completely written. So, so I had to sort of write for who was in the show at the time, which is always a very Carol Churchill thing to do. But the show has sort of morphed because we changed it throughout the years, the focus of the characters and the focus of the stories. So yeah, it is officially called Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker, an Interactive Ball is the official title of the whole show. But that's the link. It's a link. That's a mouthful. Just call it Jane Austen's Cracker or something.
So with all of this, I think it's really interesting because I love Jane Austen, and I was looking at the other productions that you have written. Mm-hmm. I noticed a theme.
Oh yes. Quite a few adaptations, yes.
And so now that you talk about being part of the Jane Austen contingency group, what do you call it?
The North American Jane Austen Society. Or society.
Why am I not part of this?
I actually don't know. I'm probably saying it wrong. I to full disclosure, I'm no longer. I think that the Oklahoma disbanded a little bit, and I haven't been able to make it to a Texas meeting. So basically, or a North Texas meeting or whatever. So.
All right. Well, we're gonna create an Oklahoma.
We could do it again. Yeah.
I like it. Okay. So why connect Jane Austen's characters and works with Christmas?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, because Christmas did not become Christmas until the Victorian age, which is post Jane Austen, and that's why Christmas Carol is such an important story, because that sort of solidified the idea of winter, and specifically Christmas as this redemption idea of this learning about your past, about becoming a better person, about celebrating all things Christmas, about giving gifts to people, and all these, all the things that come with traditional Western Christmas now. But during Jane Austen's time, Christmas was a party. Christmas was like basically New Year's Eve. So what does New Year's Eve look like? It's always a fun party to have with your friends. And sometimes family's there, sometimes they're not there. And so that's sort of the idea of the ball, is like we're having this fun little party. It's a parlor party, but there is dancing, and we're doing lots of games, and it's lots of fun.
So you talked about the fact that, one, you've already adapted her characters and her world into this amalgamation of figures and this play. And then on top of that, you have adapted it further over the course of the years.
Yes, yeah.
So what are the things that you do when you first look at adapting text, especially text so well known,
that's great,
into a play?
Well, I was taught in university how to, by a very great director that I worked with, how to cut text, which I think was invaluable. And then when you do classical, I mean, spoiler alert, you're never seeing a whole Hamlet. You are rarely seeing a whole Hamlet. You're seeing a cutting of Hamlet, most likely, because if you did the show, it was like 4.5 hours long. So I learned how to do that through also my directing work professionally, to cut a play down to like its core. I have done uncut Love's Labours, for instance, and that is a 3-hour. It's fun, but it's a lot.
Yes.
So you want to cut things down. If you just open up Pride and Prejudice, it starts off with dialogue. And most of the scenes that we remember, the scenes that we love in Pride and Prejudice, are written in almost play form. So that was an easy one. You just cut it.
Right.
You just cut it. And that was, so I have an adaptation, I did that in 2008 of Pride and Prejudice. And I just sort of sat down one day and was like, if I was gonna perform this on the stage, can I adapt it? And then I was like, oh, I'm just cutting it. I'm literally just cutting it to like the core scenes, and then like creating some transitions to get us places. And then I think the last time they performed here at Oklahoma Shakespeare, Pride and Prejudice in 2021, I cut it down even further because we wanted to have a certain amount of actors in it. I think the original cast was like 16 or 17 people, many of whom played double roles. And so I was like, you know what, we can just cut it down to a little bit. I think they did it with 12 people. I'm not positive, but so that was a cutting. So that was, I'll just say that it's easy to adapt Pride and Prejudice. Anybody can do it. I'm just kidding. I did a very good job. Then you explore the other texts. I've also adapted Sense and Sensibility and Emma. Those are a little bit more, there's so much to play with in those. So there are not a lot of scenes between Edward Ferrars and Eleanor, for instance, and they're just in love, and you're like, oh, okay, well, we have to do that on stage a bit. So that was a little bit more of a adaptation, getting into the nitty-gritty and taking it from there.
Yeah.
And you just spend a lot of time with the text. I would just read it over and over again, and then sort of come up with scenes I wanted. For Sense and Sensibility, my adaptation, which was the last time I performed on stage was 2012, that was actually a modern adaptation. So to put that in modern day took a little bit of finesse and a little bit of sort of moving the characters around to get them where they needed to be.
That's interesting because each of the adaptations seems to have had like a different element
exactly,
that you had to work with and work to create.
And then Emma, which performed here in 2022, I wrote that in 2022 also, right before. I'm a procrastinator, so I'll do the deadline. When do you need the script by? That's the day I finish the script. But that was, Emma, it was an easier adaptation than Sense and Sensibility in terms of the fact that it's kind of all in one place. It's all in one town. It's all with a very small group of characters. It's like very much a study of like small town interactions and social growth and that kind of thing. So that was an easier adaptation in the realm of that idea. So I like that. I like taking those few characters. The other adaptation I've done outside of Jane Austen is Henry Fielding's Tom Jones, which is a huge story, a very long text, lots of narration. It's such a beloved story to myself. So I really wanted to take the time to do it. But that was a lot about like not just editing and cutting, but it was like what a part of the story can we leave out and still get the core idea of the story, because that is it's a very long adventure that it's an odyssey that Tom Jones goes on, so you had to sort of adapt it from there.
So I know you should never ask this question, you should never ask someone's favorite child, but do you have a favorite adaptation baby that you have
that I've written? Probably not. It's probably, I probably don't. I love them all differently, and I love in particular Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker because people do it every year, and because it delights people who have never seen it, and the people who have made it a part of their Christmas tradition, which I'm so thankful about. It's kind of amazing that they want to come back and see it over and over again, and so I love that it gives people the Christmas feels. And I think if the Hallmark Channel has taught us anything, it's that around Christmas we need romance. We need some romance around Christmas. We need light-hearted romance,
and Jane Austen can definitely bring that to a table. Yes.
And she's so sneaky about her bringing into her novels, bringing these sort of small political ideas, these definitely cultural and societal ideals. And I think that so many people get so many different things out of her work and her characters that it's been sort of a pleasure. And you can say light on top of everything, and you can get the Hallmark movie out of it if that's what you are wanting, or you can go a little bit deeper into it and talk about, the politics of men and women, and the politics of before women really worked, what that looked like for people and things like that. So to me, it's an interesting place to be and an interesting way to go.
Yeah. No, I loved it. I love the interaction. You talked about the interactivity, and I, of course, had to get up and dance because, like you said, it's the big part of every Jane Austen novel, right? There's those moments where their hands meet briefly in a dance, or, and that for them was, were those intimate moments, because at that time period, it's not like you walked around holding hands with somebody.
That's right. Yeah.
So having that touch, having any kind of skin-on-skin contact was...
it was just dramatic.
It was dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was scandalous.
And it was also just a way for people to interact, and that's the thing that I liked about it the most, and to just go to the dancing part of it. If you've ever been to the show, you know that you're invited to... They select a number of volunteers to come up and dance with the characters. And the best thing about that, and the thing that the actors are taught, and I don't know if I know I couldn't do it. I have been doing this for 15 plus years. I've been going to country dance lessons. I've been going to Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker. I've been learning the dances along with the actors. I don't know any of those dances. But if somebody is like leading me through it and someone's calling it like a square dance, basically if you square danced in high school gym or junior high gym, you can definitely dance these dances, and you don't have to know how to do it. So
I can attest to this. This is true.
Yeah. So that's so exciting to me to be able to get up and do it. It's just really good fun. And so I also know what the dance that's high energy, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not wearing shoes for that. So.
And just remember, because I know I've talked to a few people who are like, they're going to make me dance. Volunteer. You have to volunteer to dance.
Yeah.
They will not drag you out of the audience and force you to dance.
Yeah, and if you go to the matinee that my 5.5-year-old goes to, she demands to dance every dance, and she usually gets her way. So she's taking up one of the spots.
She's the cutest ever, so hopefully you'll get to see that.
She gets to be involved. Yes, she's like, well, I'm here to dance.
This is my ball. This is my dance.
Mm-hmm.
So, what changes have you made to the Christmas Cracker over
the years? We started off, it starts off with the core of the two folks who are there to be exposition and there to host the ball, and their dialogue is based on real life correspondence and letters, the well-published letters of Jane Austen and Cassandra Austen, her sister. So Jane and Cassandra start off the show. They've always started off the show. We did at one point have a niece involved, but because we were like, we want to make sure that people know their kids can come, so we put this little kid in the show. That has since fallen to the wayside just because people know to bring their kids now, so we don't feel like we need to show them that they have to. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but she was definitely fun and precocious and loved, pulling the Christmas crackers and all that stuff. But we found that we wanted to concentrate on the stories more. The original stories we concentrated on were Pride and Prejudice, because that's, at the end of the day, that's everybody's favorite. And if it's not your favorite, like, we know you love Persuasion, but probably Pride and Prejudice is also one of your favorites. So, and then the second one that we did was Emma, because Emma actually takes place over Christmas. It's the only novel that talks about Christmas at length. So we wanted that in there. And then the third one, as I was like, we got to throw in one of the two obscure ones because we want the Jane Austen fans to love it.
Right.
So the first year we did Northanger Abbey, and we did 2 or 3 characters from that. And so that was a really great mix. And then the second year when we brought it back in 2015, we kept some of the Pride and Prejudice, but I think we scaled down Pride and Prejudice to just 4 characters. And then we brought in Sense and Sensibility, because that's also people's favorite. And then we brought in Persuasion. And then I think we've mixed and matched over the years. But that 2015 script is now what we're doing this year at Shakespeare in the Park for 2024. So
nice. Well, now we know who to expect.
Yes. So Persuasion, Anne and Captain Wentworth. From Sense and Sensibility, you get Edward Ferrars, you get the 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood, and you also get, oh no, I've forgotten his name. I want to say Alan Rickman. You guys know what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yes, and now I'm
Colonel Brandon.
There you go.
Yeah. And then from Pride and Prejudice, we have Elizabeth Bennet, we have Mr. Darcy, of course you're going to have Mr. Darcy, and then
Lydia.
We have Lydia Bennet and Mrs. Bennet, because those two are just so cute and adorable and wonderful, and Lydia gets really into the games that are played during the show, so you have to include her.
I always think it's impressive because last year when we came, Lydia, you named her as cute. As a lover of Pride and Prejudice, Lydia has always driven me crazy.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh my God. And so for me, the way that I was able to see a character that I knew so well,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the youngest sister, and she was like the annoying younger sister.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's why my sisters get mad at me.
Oh no.
But so seeing her in a way that made her endearing
Mm-hmm.
and gave me a different perspective
Oh,
on
cool.
her.
Yeah.
I thought was really cool because I was like, okay, yeah, I can give her some Christmas grace.
I never thought of that, about making Lydia palatable. I don't know.
Sorry, Lydia.
Oh, she's so cute.
But yeah,
she's the 15-year-old that drives the whole show, is what it is. That's how
Yes.
I feel about it. Tyler's my husband, and he directed the 2015 one, and he directed 2019. So we've worked together, because directors, when a director works with the script, they sometimes want to expand it, or they have a moment, or they want to improv it, or they want to just sort of have these little changes, which is great for me, because I love getting into the script and going, okay, let's talk about it, let's come up with this. And there's a lot of improv asked for by the actors. They use improvisation to sort of interact with the audience, to host games within the show and things like that. So sometimes people are like, can you tell us a bunch of words for purse or satchel? And I'm like, okay, here are a bunch of Regency appropriate terms for that kind of stuff. And so we'll go through there. But he called Lydia Lightning in a Bottle. He's like, she needs to be there. She needs to be running the games. She needs to be like all over this, making it like full of joy and mischief. So
she is momentum personified.
yes,
I feel like
yeah.
She's just is always pushing forward, thinking not so much, but moving, yes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you always need that.
So you talked about some of the changes that you made as, you know, it was being directed and as the director or the actors made choices.
Yes, yeah.
You also talked about, in a way that is very Shakespearean, the fact that you've written towards specific cast members.
Oh, yes,
and you've
yeah.
written towards a limited number of actors and how many people. So what are those limitations like as a playwright? Are they things that are fun to work with or frustrating?
I think that they're a lot of fun to work with those, because it gives you a fun challenge to aim for, and but it also is like, oh, okay, well, we have to figure out how to get this actual actor off stage or whatever. The thing about Christmas Cracker that was a challenge that I'm not used to, because I come from the classical theater world where you go on as the captain and you just put on an eye patch and you have a different accent. You're Scottish now or something like that. You know, like there's some, like, you know, you are in Much Ado, but you also play like Don John somehow and Beatrice, and you're like, how do I do that? And then you just do it. And it's a lot of fun. So I like that world of like actors are challenged in those respects. But in Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker, because you're dancing all the time, because you're playing games all the time, I had a long talk with Tyler early on, and he's like, they can't change clothes. They can't become somebody else. So I had to write for, this is the number of actors we need. These are the number of characters on stage. And to me, that was really hard, because you always want to fill it out with a maid or there's a butler that comes in or somebody's lady's maid shows up and like does something very handy in the story or creates exposition or something like that. And we didn't have that, because everybody on stage had to play that. So so that was something to sort of navigate as far as that kind of goes. Yeah.
So how did you build the plot of the story? Because I feel like it's more character driven.
Yes,
Since
yeah.
you're like, okay, here are the characters I get to work with. Here we go. So how did you design what you wanted the plot to look like and how you wanted these characters to
That's
engage?
a great question. I just started off with the scenes. I was like, okay, we can do this scene from Pride and Prejudice, and you want to see the scenes where people fall in love, but you can't do the climaxes of the stories. You can't. I mean, you can't do the ending, because you need a lot more people involved and all that stuff. But you can do like key moments that are really lovely at a ball. Darcy and Elizabeth have a lot of really great moments while dancing. They also have a lot of really great moments like before the end and before a marriage happens. So you can write those in. With Sense and Sensibility, I went to a deep cut scene that nobody does in any movie version I've seen. I think. Well, I could be wrong about that, because I think there was one in 2008 that did something. But it's, a scene where Eleanor and Marianne have this huge conversation with Edward Ferrars, and it's light and it's fun, and it's what people would do if they were out socializing on a New Year's Eve style party. And so I started off with that scene from that show, and then we have some moments of like more romantic, exciting things. And then from Persuasion, that was the one that I had to sort of invent, because it has to, their misunderstanding, that love story is based, there's like a lot of letters, and there's a lot of like, I overheard this conversation. So I had to sort of invent, what if these two just came face to face and talked about their issues? So that is like the most like that's the biggest conflict in the show. So I started off with these key scenes, like 2 scenes per couple, basically, or per story, I guess, per 3 stories. And then on top of that, I wanted Jane and Cassandra to welcome everybody to the party. And I wanted sort of the idea that Jane was writing these things as it happened. The original idea was not a great idea, which was that it all was in Jane Austen's mind. And I was like,
yeah,
that doesn't really feel like fun. And that doesn't feel like people are really there being able to dance with the characters. So I changed it a little bit to just be more like she and Cassandra are hosting this party, and what does that look like? And why aren't we seeing her brother or her mother? And those are the things that you sort of write about and talk about and stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
So as you are working with, something that's two classics, right? Because you're working with the classic of Jane Austen, who everybody knows in some way or another, and those us who are fans are avid fans. And then you're dealing with Christmas, which is another element that is incredibly traditional, that has a lot of, everybody has their own traditions.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I'm Jewish and I still have my traditions, like meet me in St. Louis, I will watch that every holiday. But so how do you deal with the expectations people have? Is that something you worry about in terms of that, or just something you play with?
It's something that we play with. It's definitely, this is not a story that, just to be honest, the play itself does not take place on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. It's basically like, it's Christmas time, come over to my house, I'm having a Christmas party. And we actually talk about Jane Austen's birthday, which is December 16th, and most years a show lands on that date, so we talk about it's near my birthday, it is my birthday today. So some of it is also a little bit of a birthday party for Jane Austen, which is always a lot of fun. But it's basically like, it's less about people's expectation of Christmas and tradition and family and all the things that Christmas means to a modern day person, and it's more like, what do you expect out of like a holiday Christmas party at your office? But maybe it's a little more fun and there's more dancing. You wouldn't have dancing at your office. I would love to work at an office that had dancing.
Right? I haven't been there yet though. So, in terms of being an actor, and a playwright and a director, how do those overlap? When you're writing a play, does being an actor or being a director have a big influence on how you construct a play? And then kind of the same thing as you are directing, do your different positions, your many different hats, do they ever tend to overlap?
Yeah. I think that's where my lighting designer comes in. I'm just kidding. I wish I was a lighting designer. I love them so much. But being an actor too, I've never met a writer though. I don't even know if they have to be an actor to have an idea of how things sound. In my past, I did a reading of a screenplay by an author coming from out of town to come to the Dead Center Film Festival here in Oklahoma City. And I have never read anything where I was like, this has a very specific voice, this character. And if I don't get this right, she's gonna be there and know. And not to mention, it's not gonna tell the story she's wanting to tell. But she wrote in such a way that her cadence, I was like, I just have to practice what this sounds like, so in the reading I could present what I think is happening. And she was like, you nailed it. Yes. So I think that everybody writes in a voice that they know in their heads, if that makes sense. Like it's almost like Jane Austen writes in a way that's why almost all Mrs. Bennets sound the same. If you watch a bunch of different Pride and Prejudice movies, they all are like, they're all like a very teetering, and there's different interpretations, but it's all the same cadence to the voice because she wrote that in the novel. So it's easy to write that. Where I sort of played around was in the letters between Cassandra and Jane, because they don't have necessarily a story to tell. They do. They have a sisterly story to convey, but they don't have like a novel written about them, for instance, I guess is what I'm saying. So I wanted to make sure that I was capturing their voices from their letters. appropriately in the way they spoke to each other. So I guess that's where the actor comes in. As the director comes in, it just has to do with like, okay, well, we can't, these scenes need to be spread apart because we can't always, we can't focus so much on this one, and how do we end this story, and does this have a satisfying ending to this moment for this character? And when do we bring in levity? When do we bring in concern? When do we bring in a serious, like, romantic moment? Or when do we bring in, like, a very light, fun thing? So I think for a director, as a director, that's sort of how I looked at it. And then I also rely on the directors. I've never directed this show myself, but I rely on the directors to be like, okay, well, there's too many dances. Like, okay, well, we can lose this dance here, and that works, and that's how we sort of bridge that gap.
So that's interesting. So you've never directed this one. Would you want to?
No, and it's not because I don't love the script. I think it's more along the lines of, I feel like this script does really well with people who, it's almost like a piece of musical theater. And because I'm not a musical theater person, I wouldn't know how to direct that. And it also lends itself really good to people with a background in improvisation. So I think that it takes a director who sort of has their hand in the idea of music, and has the, in their hand in classical theater, and has their hand in the idea of also improvisation. I think that needs to be brought into it. So I just, I felt, I have definitely directed shows that I have written in the past, but I actually like the perspective of having somebody else direct it. I think that's nice. It feels like a collaboration. It makes me feel, theater is such a collaborative art. It's an art of artists coming together to create something. And there's so many different people that play a part in classical theater production. There's a dramaturg who's looking at the academic or historical aspects of it. There's, the costume designer who's bringing in the beautiful or not so beautiful or whatever, and also telling the story through clothes visually. And there's the lighting designer. I love you, lighting designers. And there's the choreographers, and there's the musicians and the music directors, and there's just so many people bringing something together behind the scenes, on stage, and otherwise. And playwriting, which is so interesting that that's been my focus for so many years, takes me into a room by myself for quite a while, for most of the process. And then I get it in front of other people, and they're like, oh yeah, like that doesn't work there. And I'm like, okay, we'll move that, and it's like, then it becomes collaborative when I release it, but it has to almost be like fully formed before I can release it. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does make sense.
So, I mean, like, I would equate it to, as a director and as an actor and as anything, you do so much work prior to rehearsals or behind the scenes or on your own, but then you bring it to other people, and then, as an actor, your lines change, or your inflection changes, or your objective changes based on the play with another person.
Right. And
you can move that. Or the director going, I want to focus on this in this scene, or I want to focus on something a little bit different. And as a director, your work focuses so much on the play with the actors and bringing forth the story and helping the actors to tell that story. But as a playwright, you're just sort of alone by yourself, which I like because I did so much collaborative work for so many years. But then it's always nice to bring it to other people.
Yeah, and what is it like seeing it brought to life? What is it like actually watching it performed?
It's great. And I have tried to direct from the page, if that makes sense. I've been like, well, they have to, if they mention this kind of thing, they're going to have to get that out of Pesa costume. So I've done that kind of thing in shows and in plays. So I've sort of tried to influence that, or they'll be like, we get that particular thing, and I'll be like, oh, we'll just cut it.
We'll just can't say this then.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are things that I can do to sort of direct from the wings. I have to be honest, I don't remember a lot. I have a short memory, so I'll write it down, and I'll even agonize over it, and I'll edit it for months, and it'll take forever, and then it gets up in there, and they're like, and I'm like, did they say that line? And they're like, yeah, they did. And I'm like, okay, good. That sounds like, oh yeah, it all sounds good. You know?
I think it's also different having it, you know, there are certain lines that you really pull out when you're looking at a text or when you're writing something. But then when you put it all together, I'm not sure. It's almost like, you know, when I was talking to Anwen about costume design, and she was like, well, if something's really standing out, sometimes you've done it wrong. Like if you're, you know, if somebody's wearing something and they're like,
yeah,
everybody's looking at X.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it means you've gone too far, you push it too much. And it feels like it might be the same thing with writing, where sometimes if like you're writing and something stands out so much, it doesn't necessarily fit in with the tone or the rest of the story or what the character is saying otherwise.
Yeah. Things can stand out in a bad way,
yeah.
for sure.
And you're just like, oh, you're like, it's a great line, but
oh, we can change that. Yeah, we can make that change. Yeah, and that's the other thing is I've said, if you love it, then Jane Austen wrote it, and I'm the vessel that's put it on stage or put it in the script. But if you hate it, I probably wrote it. But we can change that. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Well, and I think it comes to, you know, we are always talking about Shakespeare, and one of the biggest, I would say, issues almost is the fact that Shakespeare's put up on this pedestal where his words are sacred and you can't change things, and like, you know, God forbid you have the wrong inflection on the wrong thing, and it puts this stress and pressure on the performance, on the actors. And I wonder how much of that rubs off on somebody like Jane Austen, who again is such a big figure in literature, where people have that same stress of like, I can't mess up Jane Austen, like I can't.
But they do all the time, and that's it's not that they even mess it up, it's just that things are misquoted from Shakespeare all the time.
Yes.
There's that theater company that, where are they? They were in New York, and this is about 10 years ago, where they did a production of what people remember from Romeo and Juliet. And it was literally like language of people like going, I think that's what it said. Like, and it's hilarious and wonderful, and it's like all this stuff, because like none of the words are actually correct, and none of that is actually going on. And I think the same thing can be done with Jane Austen, but I think people misquote Jane Austen all the time. She's misquoted in so many movie versions that are so beloved that I think it's sort of it's okay.
Yeah.
But you do want to get sort of, I always think the tone is so important, if that makes sense. Like the tone of our characters, because you can take like any acting experience, you can take Hamlet to a super dark place, and then suddenly you're just watching this angry guy for several hours. Or you can take, there's so many characters you can take to different spots, make too light of something or don't make something significant enough for all this stuff. But I always think that tone it's a tightrope to walk, because if you're only seeing a snippet of these stories, then you gotta not fall into certain traps. Like Marianne can't be too much like Lydia. You know, Marianne Dashwood is very fanciful and very romantic and very she's such a delicious, wonderful character, but you can't make her someone without a sense of humor, or who is not, like when they poke fun at her, she has to be able to recognize it and take it in stride. Right. And Eleanor can't be so precious about everything, and persuasion can't be just this like relentless, angry confrontation between two people. It has to have the nuance of that. So you have to bring it into the language, but I also advise like directors, I'm like, this is a trap you can fall into. Let's talk about the subtleties of it. Let's keep it Christmas.
Yeah.
If we can.
No, I think that's a great point in terms of talking about tone and what is trying to be, what the overall intention is of the piece, right? Because you think of any of those specific characters, you think of Lizzie, and she has a very specific, just personality to her, and if that's what you've got to get, yes, I agree with that.
There's also just the romantic thing that I believe in, which is that there's a lid for every pot, and so you have to sort of not the Lizzie Bennet trap that you fall into is that she studies people's mannerisms and personalities, and she thinks she's sort of above it all, but you have to make her relatable and able to laugh at herself and able to be a real person. I think the hardest thing about Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker in performance is that you literally have a stage full of leading ladies and leading men.
Yes.
And so you're like, they all have to be fun and relatable, but in different ways, and they are, and the stories are so different, so it's not necessarily this big challenge, but it's also like it's like we're just getting sort of the best of the best, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So you don't have to
Yep.
You don't have to slog it through with a bunch of minor characters.
So I'm really excited because we are going to be talking to Danielle Cuss about relationships.
Oh, great.
And so, do you have a favorite relationship of Jane Austen's relationships? Is there one relationship that stands out to you?
I mean, it changes every year, like it can. But I always think, okay, so I read a quote from Julia Quinn. Julia Quinn is, for those of you who don't know, a romance writer who writes Regency-era romances, and you may be familiar with Bridgerton. So that's the series of books that she wrote and part of it. But I read a quote from her that said, as the writer, you fall in love with the leading men. And the leading women are always terrific, and you're always wanting to be their best friends, but you really fall in love with that leading man. So I think it's about men that are the leading men that we would want in our lives, if that makes sense, or the leading people that we would want in our lives, I should say. So I think you have to fall in love with them. And looking at our cast, I think you will. So I'm very excited.
I agree. I'm hoping to talk to a few of them.
Yay! Yeah, that'll be great.
But yes, it's a great cast. So, and then I guess my question then becomes from favorite couple, favorite leading man?
Oh.
You can't say Tyler, that doesn't count.
No, I can't say my husband. I think Captain Wentworth is because he's such a quiet, dark horse in the mix. I think he's a lot of people's favorites. I think people are just like, it's the guy that you're like, no thank you as a young person, and then as an old person you're like, dang it.
Well, it's actually really funny because Paxton is playing.
Oh, does Paxton play that? Yes. I didn't even know that. I forgot about that. I'm sorry, Paxton. That's awesome. That's
and I was like, it's so perfect because he has that glowiness about him where he's just such a warm character. He can go on stage and glow. I was telling him the other day, I was like, man, the nuance, like you bring in
I directed him as Oberon Theseus in Midsummer, and I wrote him this note, and I was like, you're a great leading man, you're the leading man I wanted for this, and he's like, no one's ever called me that, and I was like, no one's called you that? You're like a terrific leading man, you're so smiley and so wonderful and so, accessible, but also you could be broody. Like it's very Jane Austen. I think that's really cool.
I agree. Michelle and I talk about this all the time. We're like, yes, Paxton's in it. Woohoo! So, I'm so Paxton, a shout out to you. You're great. But so as we're talking about, so we talked about favorite characters. What about favorite Christmas traditions?
Ooh.
So you mentioned that in the past few years, since you've had your delightful daughter,
Yes,
that
yeah.
Christmas has exploded all over your house.
Yeah, it was an unconscious decision that just exploded all over my house in about 2019. I just made Christmas everywhere. We had, I think, like, my husband and I barely got a tree before that. We were like, do you do a tree? Do we have a tree? Where's the tree? Do we get it out? Did we miss Christmas? Like, that was sort of our level of enthusiasm. And not that we don't like Christmas, it's just the, like, decorating. Like, our house was never the place people were coming because we didn't have any kids and, you know, all that stuff. But then we had the baby, and it was just like, oh, there is going to be 4 trees in every room, and we're going to do this. And there isn't a lot of space in our house. We were just talking about that, and it's just, it's everywhere. So there's a lot of Christmas decor that comes out, specifically trees, specifically mid-century style trees that are, they're faux trees that are fluffy, that are like a pastel color, like a pink or a blue or a green. I mean, like an evergreen, yes, but like also like a teal green. And then there's, or white, there's some white in there. So it's sort of like a 1960s style Christmas, but it's all over the place and it's everywhere. And then every year we're allowed to get like 1 or 2 more pieces, but I think that turns into 6 somehow. Like my husband and my daughter go out and buy just a bunch more. So decor. And then the other Christmas tradition that I love are Christmas movies. And they are Turner Classic Movies. They are like Christmas in Connecticut, basically anything with Barbara Stanwyck in it. I think we watch things that are not Christmas movies with her in it, just around Christmas. And then, there's just a host of them that I like have to watch a bunch of, and that usually starts this time of year, but I haven't watched Christmas in Connecticut yet this year. I can't even believe it. And then after that we have like a bunch of things that we do like family style, like Christmas Eve versus Christmas Day and things like that we've started to have Christmas traditions with. So it's been a lot of fun. And then we actually have a Christmas tradition to take, because there's so much decor and it takes so long to put up, and then to take it all down, we have like 48 hours to take it all down. We watch this very specific British show called Black's Books, which is it's from the early 2000s. You can find it streaming on Amazon. It's not Christmas themed. My parents have the Christmas theme of watching Moonstruck, which is not a Christmas movie.
No.
So they watch that movie with Cher, and I mean,
When they're taking down their decorations?
no, it's just something that they.
Okay.
My dad thinks it takes place over Christmas. It does not take place over Christmas. It's just winter in New York City. So I don't know.
It's like the Die Hard thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's Die Hard. Yeah.
But Die Hard at least has like, it's a Christmas party.
It is.
So that's where people can kind of
That's
make the
true,
argument
yeah.
that it's a Christmas party.
Trading Places is that's like a real
Oh my
odd
gosh.
pick. Trading Places.
But I love that
It
one.
takes place over Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, and so you just sort of get everything in that one movie. So
Such a good one.
yeah, but
Yeah.
so there's a bunch of old movies that are watched. We go to the Nutcracker as a family with Oklahoma City Ballet. We love that. My daughter's really into ballet, and so they have. So I'm plugging another company in this podcast, but they have done for the past few years something for people who don't like. I forget the term, but it's for little kids, but it's also for the autism community.
Like sensory.
Sensory, yes. It's a low sensory show, and they do one of those. So they won't have a live orchestra for that one and things like that. And it's just usually earlier in the day. So it's also good for like little kids who don't necessarily can sit through 2 hours, even though you're like, shut up, it's coffee. You're like, because everybody has their favorite part of that thing. But there's so many cool Christmas traditions, which is why I'm like so grateful and so astonished and delighted that Christmas Cracker has become that for other people, because it's such an it's sort of an outside of the box idea for Christmas, but I love that. I think it's great. And also my favorite thing about Christmas Cracker, one of my favorite things, is that it's usually sponsored by Brahms, and there's free ice cream
Yes.
at the show, and that's so exciting to just go and have a bunch of ice cream. It's so cute, and I love it. I love that that's a part of it. I think it's a fun idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a fun experience, and that's what it is. You know, It's an experience where you can sing and dance and have ice cream and see your favorite characters in the flesh, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, it's a great community feeling that comes from this production.
And I'm so in the people in my life who have know me outside of theater, the folks that have made Christmas Cracker their personal tradition have always surprised me. Does that make sense? It's like a guy I work with who's a real dude's dude who doesn't see a lot of live theater, doesn't go to like whatever, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm taking my granddaughter this year, and it's like he is delighted by it. He thinks it's the best thing. He's like, I hope we get to sit next to Colonel Brandon again, because he improvised with me, and I thought that was the best thing in the world. And I'm like, wow, yeah, and I'm really thankful it's resonating with so many different kinds of audiences.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just love feeling like part of something, and that production, because it's so interactive, allows you to be a part of it.
But it doesn't call you out in a bad way.
Yes.
And I love that, because people get so nervous. They're like, I don't want to do anything. You don't have to. You can sit there and enjoy the show.
Just sit there and eat your ice cream. It's fine. It's totally fine. So I remembered.
What is it?
Midsummer.
Yes.
So you're an artist. You see things, and I think we see that through the plays you've written and how you reconceive certain ideas or characters. And so we got to see Midsummer, and it's one of those where we got to see a very different perspective of it, right? We saw your vision of how you wanted to see it. And so as a director, how do you come up with your ideas and then put them on the stage for something that is, again, it can be really difficult with Midsummer to then put it into use the same language, use the same cast, and put it in a different place for your audience. So how do you make those decisions? How do you think through those ideas that you get?
Well, first of all, I love a conceptual Shakespeare. I love a pumpkin pants Shakespeare, which is a very shorthand or slang way of saying a very traditional Shakespeare. But I love a concept Shakespeare, and it always has to come from the play itself. So you read Midsummer, and it starts off with Theseus and with Hippolyta, and I feel like those are two forgotten characters. So I wanted to make sure that they were a part of, they start and they don't end the play, but they start and they are the framing device of the show. So I wanted to make sure that they were not forgotten. And I also wanted to make sure that the thing that I loved most about Midsummer is all the women speaking up for what they want. Hermia, for sure, she's being threatened with death to not marry the right guy, and so but she's so firm about it. And then there's the idea of Helena saying, I don't know how you fell out of love with me, but I am not leaving you alone until we're back together again. That to me is a strong woman. The idea of Hippolyta being conquered, brought to Athens, but then having this voice that is used throughout the play was very interesting to me. The conflict between Oberon and Titania, the two fairies of the underworld, and Titania's strength and voice, and sort of the sense that she makes out of everything is very interesting to me. So I started off with those sort of all of the women in mind, and I thought, when is a time and a place and a period where women's rights were being talked about? And I feel it was like the 20s with the voting rights, and I was like, that doesn't really feel like something to me. I feel like there's a real generational thing to be talked about within the world of the mid to late 1960s. And I loved the music, and I loved the clothes, and I was like, well, this is a slam dunk. And I also loved the historical, I spent the previous summer in my free time reading books about Patty Boyd, Mary Quant, the fashion designer, Barbara Hulanicki, who is the fashion designer behind the store in England called Biba, which was a very big like women's fashion movement as well during that time period. And it all came from the fact that there was the pill, so we could wear skirts as short as we wanted to. There was women were able to make their own money for the first time, so they were able to go shopping without their mothers or their husbands or their boyfriends for the first time and wear and purchase what they wanted to wear. And also in fashion history, there was this moment where all the fashion had come from France, and then it gets trickled down into what everybody else wears in the Western world. Well, for the first time ever, the streets of London were basically dictating what people were wearing. The youth of London was feeding the designers who then designed the clothes, and then it just sort of was a mirror process over and over again. And so I was like, that's what I want to see. These women have, for the first time, they're able to make their own money, they're able to be their own person, and that has given them a voice.
Right.
And what does that look like? And then I worked with Anwen, the beautiful costume designer, to sort of make the look of that a reality, which is why there's no set in that play. It was just the set that was already built for the basic set. So it was all costumes. That's what I wanted it to be. So
Yes.
that's what I thought about that. And then it just sort of fell into place, the idea of the mechanicals being musicians, not magicians. And the idea of the underworld being this sort of like other place, maybe a little bit futuristic place, but maybe also of the time of the 60s, of this sort of counterculture coming into play. So that's what I was thinking about that.
I love that. Yeah.
But I think it has to come from the text, because if it doesn't come from the text, you're just sort of putting an idea on it. Like you're putting a radical idea on it, and it may work or it may not.
Yes.
And you're sort of gambling and rolling the dice. But if it comes from the text itself, you know, the youth wanting, you know, stir up the youth to merriment, all of the stuff about the youth being important to what they were doing politically and all of that stuff. So yeah, I wanted to bring that out as much as possible and paint that picture. So
I love it. Well, I would ask you favorite line, favorite actor, favorite play for Shakespeare.
for Shakespeare,
But maybe I should do Austen. Either one. You can tell me either. We've kind of talked about some of the Austen pieces, so whichever one you want to do.
the first Shakespeare play I ever saw, and actually I don't remember if it was Comedy of Errors or if it was Love's Labour's Lost. I was 10. I think it was the first live one I saw was definitely Love's Labour's Lost. So I've always had a special place in my heart for that show. I just think it's such a love letter, and it's such a talk about a romantic comedy, and talk about, you know, it's just, I mean, like Hallmark might have written it. It's like the guys who give up, like, we're not gonna talk to women, we're gonna ban women from our site because we need to concentrate on being academics. And then like who shows up, like the 4 most perfect women in all of the entire, you know, Western world shows up for them.
Yes.
And they're like, dang it, we just made this vow. So it's just like a sweet show that has so much great poetry and language, and I think it gets lost because a lot of people aren't familiar with it, so it's not often done.
Yeah.
So I mean, Midsummer is fun and lovely, and I love so much about it, and it's really accessible, and it's a great show for people to like. It's a great first Shakespeare show for lots of different reasons and lots of things. You know, the little kids, my daughter is like, I'm a fairy now. Like, she saw those fairies and she's like, we're it, you know? And so it's like, for little kids, it's like fairies, and for younger people, it's love story. For like the Shakespeare novice, it's just beautiful language and an accessible, fun, a very funny story. So I think for that thing, but for just my overall favorite, it's Love's Labours, which is why I love romantic comedies, which is why I love Jane Austen. So it all sort of feeds together. So.
Oh, that explains so much about me now. Okay, now it all makes sense. I feel seen. Okay, so everybody, if you're looking for a tradition, or you already have a tradition and you're coming back to see us again, Christmas Cracker. So Jane, we'll give its full name, Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker ballroom.
An interactive ball.
An interactive ball.
You can leave the last part of it off. I think I do. So,
So that is opening up on December 5th, and it runs until the 22nd. So from December 5th to the 22nd, please come out and see us, sing with us, dance with us, eat ice cream with us. Remember, it's all voluntary, so you can take and leave whatever you want to. But it's just it's going to be a great opportunity, a great event. So we'll hope to see you there.
yeah, get your tickets early because it's at the intimate indoor space, and there's not as many seats as our outdoor theater. So,
Good call, good call.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for listening. As always, let me know what you want to hear about next. And please subscribe to get the emails and information about the next episodes. Thank you so much for joining
thanks for
me.
having me.
Just remember, all the world's a stage, and you too can be a shrew.